Okay.
Welcome to C-Suite Scale, where executive minds unpack the real stories behind business growth. Today, I am joined by Chris Vermilya, who is the VP of Services at Loom Security. Welcome, Chris. How are you?
Thank you, Brenda. Very good. I'm good. Coming off a nice weekend here and getting into the week. So it's good to be here.
Very good. Well, we're so excited to have you. I guess we'll kick things off by just kind of talk to me a little bit about who are you and what kind of a role do you play as the VP of Services?
Sure. So, like you said, my name is Chris Vermilya. I lead the services delivery team here at Loom Security, which means a lot of different things, right? We're a newer organization. We've been around for a little over a year officially at this point, but we like to say we're vintage, right? The rest of people on the team, the founders, myself included, we've been in the space for a long time. A lot of different background from a services perspective in the cybersecurity space. That's where we've operated in the past and where we continue to operate and plan to. There's still a lot of gaps in that space. As we look through things, why did we start Loom? Why are we going back into this space? The answer to that really is because the gaps still exist, which is good and bad, right? I mean, we want to see progress, we want to see things move forward, but from our perspective, there's still a missing link in the services side of all of that. A lot of good tools out there, but we don't want to just, most things aren't just drop a tool in, turnkey solution, and walk away. So from a Loom perspective, we want to provide those services to bridge that gap, help customers actually make progress in different spaces, help them grow, that they can achieve some of their business drivers and their goals, while at the same time accomplishing those cybersecurity goals. So my role on the services side is really around the execution of those services. My team is the hands on the keyboard, boots on the ground when we go in and talk to customers from an advisory perspective, all the way through a professional services, typical implementation style, and then all the way through to managed services to make sure that they can get the most value out of the platforms that they're putting together. In addition to that, I'm also responsible for the technical build out of a lot of our solutions. So we're building a software platform as well that helps take a lot of what we're doing across the security posture management space and putting that under a different lens. And we can talk about that in a little bit, but really just kind of understanding what can that platform look like, what are the values, and what are the drivers. So my team's responsible for the technical side of that build out as well. Also involved from the pre-sales perspective, being a smaller organization, no one really gets away from doing anything from outside of a sales perspective, I should say. But to me, that's one of the best parts and kind of why I saved that for last. Like I love sitting down with different customers and understanding, what are you trying to do? Why are you getting stuck? Where is it painful? How can we make things better? Not just from a check the box and move on, but a true partnership, as cliche as that sounds, but helping people understand how they continue to drive forward from the security posture, but also achieving those business goals as well. So those are probably the three primary areas that I'm responsible for, but obviously a whole lot more falls in between those as well.
Yeah, wow, you said so much. I really want to dive into a lot of that just to kind of understand a little bit more. I guess first off, you said that Loom is a fairly new company. Talk to me a little bit about your journey, even leading up to this, because I know that it's always exciting to jump into a new endeavor that you're passionate about. Kind of what has led you over to Loom to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started on the customer side of things, worked in a manufacturing organization in the Pittsburgh area for over 10 years, wearing all kinds of different hats. Started as an application developer, moved through very traditional enterprise architecture roles, some application architecture as well. Ultimately landed in the cybersecurity space, doing primarily identity and access management. I've always had kind of a passion for understanding more of the people side of that, and not just a who has access to what, but why do they have it? Why do they need it? Should they have it? Those type of questions. The organization I was at didn't have an identity program at the time. A lot of research into can we, should we, but right about that time was when the shift really started happening of understanding, especially in the manufacturing space that tends to lag from a technology perspective of it's protecting the castle with the moat, so to speak, right, is no longer relevant. You hear that all the time, right? The human, the
Yeah.
identity is the new perimeter. That's the path they were going down. So I jumped into that role to really design and build the identity program for that organization. And I loved it, right? Everything from identity governance through the more access management, privileged access management, all the traditional pillars we put in place at that organization and really had a fun time doing it. And so once that was, kind of well on its way, I had an opportunity to continue down the identity path, but on the consulting side of things. So at that point, I came over to the dark side, joined the consulting side of the world, and continued building and leading identity programs for all different kinds of organizations. Learned a lot in that space as well, obviously going from one focused environment customer to a multitude, right? It was kind of joke going from managing one program to managing 70 programs, all kinds of industry verticals, all kinds of different customer types. I learned a lot along the way, like I said, but really just have always had a passion in that identity space. made a couple hops throughout that consulting journey, ultimately landed at a company called Fish Tech Group. And that's where I met our Loom founder. His name is Chuck Crawford. He was one of the founders of the Fish Tech Group. He had been involved in FishNet Security as well, which was an earlier Gary Fish organization. And so really got to know Chuck in my role at Fish Tech. I led the identity practice there, and got to help grow that out from a national perspective, pre-sales all the way through the managed delivery. From there, the Fish Tech Group merged with the Herjavec Group to form a company called Cyderis. And so that got to be involved in that as well. Took us a little bit more of a global footprint, which was a lot of fun, working a little bit more outside of the US. And then from there, things kind of could go different directions. So I ended up taking a role outside of that organization for a bit, and then got a call from Chuck, a little over a year ago saying, "Hey, I'm starting this thing, right? Would you be interested?" And knowing Chuck and knowing who he was and how he ran his businesses, it was really a no-brainer, right? I mean, yes, absolutely. A lot of trust in him and the rest of the team that he had put together. And so we jumped into Loom. And like I said a little bit earlier, his goal in building Loom was getting back to that services mindset, very customer focused, customer driven, helping people solve these problems. And that's right up my alley. So my role now is much bigger than just identity. We have an identity foundation to a lot of what we do, and I'll always have that passion. But our services are much, much bigger than that at this point. But that's the background that I bring to it. And from a service delivery perspective, that's where I've been for a while. And I love seeing the success factors. I love seeing the progress. To me, the worst thing is starting a project and then walking away before it's done. I hate that. Being on the service delivery side, I get to see a lot of these all the way through, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like such a smooth transition to get to where you are, which is what we would all, hope for is, just that perfect opportunity popping up. So that's really exciting. And I want to understand a little bit more about, just for our users, you're saying the identity and, growing the customer base and focus on the customer. So, just for our listeners today, explain a little bit in the cybersecurity space what that identity kind of platform looks like.
Sure. So it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So this question is very timely, especially in where we are today, right? I mean, identity and access management, the traditional sphere that is, has grown a lot and is spidered a lot, which is a good thing. When we talk about identity, it's everything from a human, right? You and I, we have accounts, we have access, we have devices, all this kind of stuff, but it's the non-human side of it too. And that's a much, much bigger play as time has gone on. Identity encompasses all of that. But from a Loom perspective, we want to take all of that, which is still true, but then put what we call it a business persona that rides on top of that. And that's a very different way to talk about a lot of these security topics, and one that we found a lot of success in. And so we talk about how do we earn customers' trust? How do we go to market? How do we, build some of these relationships? A lot of it's around that business persona conversation. So to answer your question of how does identity fit into all of that? It's a piece of it, but it's only one piece of that. It's a foundational piece for sure. Don't get me wrong, especially being very biased as an identity guy, but there's more to it. So when we look at that business persona, underlying that are really 5 control points is how we look at security. It's, the identity, who you are, the device, what are you using to get to where you're trying to go, laptop, mobile, tablet, kiosk, whatever you happen to be using, the network or the cloud that you're using to get from A to B. And it's network and cloud in a lot of cases, right? These hybrid environments that have legacy on-prem networks, but a lot of things are cloud-based now. So how are you getting from A to B, right? Is it a VPN? Is it through a coffee shop? Is it, however you're getting there? That's a big control point. The application or the target itself, where are you trying to go? Is it a web application? Is it a server? Whatever it is. And then 5th is the data. What are you ultimately surfacing as you get through all that? We boil a lot of things down to those 5 points because that's where you're going to both be able to prevent attacks from the preventative side, but also remediate if you do have an issue or an incident that comes up. The business persona piece of that, trying to summarize a little bit, is really taking that back to the fact of that's all well and good. That's great from the security posture, but most of our customers, their business is not technology. Their business is not cybersecurity. They have a business to run, right? Whether it's healthcare or manufacturing or fintech, whatever it is, their goal is to make money in their business. So all these business users are trying to do their jobs, and we just keep throwing these controls at them, right? MFA, change your password, device posture, certificates, all these things we do, which are not bad things, but in a lot of cases, we're doing it just to check a box, right? PCI compliance says we need this. HIPAA compliance says we need that. Our NIST framework says we need to do this. So we check these boxes, and the business users at the other end of it going, I can't even spell mist. Like, I don't know what that is. Like,
Yeah.
you telling me this is useless. I just need to get to this SharePoint and it won't let me. So we're creating this culture where our business users are actively trying to go around the controls that we put in place. We use this graphic all the time. It's a picture of a gated parking lot, on a snowy day. So the gate is down over the little access road in the parking lot, and there's just tire tracks going around the gate, right?
Mhm.
It's like we've
Yeah.
completely defeated the purpose. So if
Mhm.
we're doing that and we're making it so painful that our business users are trying to actively get around the controls, we made a problem way worse. And
Mhm.
so we put this business focus, this business persona lens back on everything that we do to say, what are you, Brenda, trying to do when you log into your computer in the morning, when you pick up your phone to turn your alarm off and you check email right away? Like,
Mhm.
whatever that journey is, what are you trying to do? If we can
Yeah.
secure back to those 5 points, that journey from your perspective, the data security, security compliance checkboxes, they'll take care of themselves, right? If we do it the right way. But we need to change that conversation and how we're doing it. That whole conversation that I probably could have said in a shorter way, but that lands really, really well, especially as we talk to CISOs or even, finance users, CFOs or BISOs, business information security officers are becoming more popular. If we can change that narrative, we can be a lot more effective. And so when we tackle any engagement, any project, we call it the Loom lens. That's how we view it, right? That's the conversations we want to have and the questions we need to ask. So that's our root, that's our differentiator, if you want to call it that. But it's something that lands really, really well as we have these conversations.
That's great. Well, I'm glad you gave a long answer too, because it is very complex. And that's important that, you kind of dive into all of those areas because they all, together comprise who you are. And so that's really important, which I appreciate that. I mean, you talk a lot about, and this really is the focus of your company as well, is on the customer journey, making sure that you're understanding them. How do you go about making sure that you find that perfect customer that is a good fit for Loom?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's simple and it's complex, right? Because on the one hand, for us, it's all about listening to what those true challenges are. What are you trying to do? And again, it's a little bit cliche. A lot of people say this, right? No, we just got to get back to the root cause. Like, don't just do what's being asked. That's part of it. But the other part of it is why are you, what perspective are you coming from, right? What business persona are you talking through?
Mhm.
We usually get answers in one of two ways, right? You ask people, what are you trying to do? What's painful? One, they give you a list, right? This is hard. This is hard. This is hard. We've tried this. This isn't working. And you can start kind of tackling those, asking a little bit more conversations. The other answer is on the exact opposite end of the spectrum. I don't even know. I don't even know where to start. Tell me what to look for. Tell me what my risks are, right? Risk is a huge part of all of this. And so depending on that answer, we of course can go both directions in how we answer it. But the way that really helps build some of that customer trust, it's all about trust, from a relationship perspective, is helping people understand why we talk about these 5 control points and why the business persona overlay is effective. So I'll give you a quick example. You've got different tools that tell you different things, right? Chris is a risky user because he signed in from 2 different countries within 5 minutes, kind of that impossible travel. Fairly basic signal, but yes, indicates that there's something that may need to be looked at. There are tools, and most people have tools that will tell you that, but that's where there's no other context. Well, what device did he use? What IP address is he coming from? What's the risk posture of that device? What application is he trying to go to? What data is actually behind that application? Most organizations have answers to every one of those questions, but spread across multiple tools, right? So I can't tell you that, well, okay, Chris signed in from 2 different locations, but it's from the same device. Well, that's not really possible, right? So that's more of a red flag. Or the opposite, from 2 different devices. One of them is the corporate owned laptop, fully managed. We have their certificate, we fully trust it. The other is a completely unknown device. Now, that's good context, and tools will start to give you that. So if you look at those 5 pillars, some tools will give you 2 of the 5 or 3 of the 5, but never all 5. So take that same example. Okay, well, the user and the device, maybe a little bit about the network. What application are they trying to get to? Is it just email, or are they trying to get into your financial back end, trying to get into your service delivery models? And what data is actually behind that? Is it sensitive? Have you classified it? Can you see that whole picture to know that, okay, well, Chris is actually risky because we know these 5 things, or what's relatively low risk and it looks like it may be a one-off because it was a VPN trying to tunnel in from another country to watch some Netflix show, right?
Mhm.
We don't know that at the beginning, but we have to put all that data together. So what we're building, both from a managed service perspective and ultimately, a platform in the future, is a tool that bridges all that context together. That story is what
Mhm.
really helps grow customer trust. Because again, back to where I started, right? Answering that question of what do you need help with, answering in 2 ways. The person that says, I don't even know where to start looking, We talk through
Right.
that example and say, can you
Yeah.
answer these questions? You have this information. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe. And so
Yeah.
if we can have that conversation and start to illustrate that, that's where the light bulbs start to go on.
Hmm.
And they say, well, I don't know, let me ask. Maybe we can do some of that. So that's fine. Go ask the questions. We'll talk to you next week. And they come back and say, hey, turns out we can't do that. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then the conversation moves from there. So very
Mhm.
conversational. A lot of trust has to be there, but that's kind of a storyline we like to follow.
Yeah, no, it's great. You have solid foundation and really just understanding what questions to ask to create that pain point with the client.
Yep,
Mhm.
absolutely. It's fun too, being in the space as long as a lot of us have. Like we, like I said before, new company, but very vintage in the sense that we know a lot about the space. We know a lot of people in the space. We go back to some of customers that we've had in the past and say, hey, we know you were working on that thing a couple years ago. How's it going? Well, kind of, sort of. It's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
let's pick it back up, right? It's changed a little bit. Let's go the next direction. Assessments are a thing that a lot of organizations do. Hey, where are you at? Let's give you this roadmap. Assessments are tough. A lot of times the output sits on a shelf somewhere and there's not a lot of progress. So Chuck likes to say we don't say that word. It's a bad word, right? We don't do assessments because they have this connotation of a lot of work with not a lot of output. Ours are more baseline analysis. You can call it whatever you want, but essentially the output is very, very pragmatic. Here's the
Mhm.
next three things you should do in the next year. And we're going to keep tabs, right? We'll check in. Hey, did you do the thing? Did you do the thing? Because a lot of times it's very easy and makes sense at the point in time, but that's where it stops. So it's
Yeah.
very relational, having those follow-ups and just keeping tabs with people.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And so, considering that Loom is still within the first year, it sounds like it's been wildly successful and you're off to a great start. I guess how are you going about lead generation to grow your business? And talk to me a little bit about some of the successes and challenges that that's presenting.
Sure. Yeah. So a lot of the lead generation when we first started was kind of the friends and family approach, right? People we knew, customers that we could kind of walk back into and just really keep building on those relationships. That's
Mhm.
only going to get you so far. And so we do rely very heavily on word of mouth, right? People talking, say, hey, you should talk to these guys. A lot of marketing, a lot of everything from LinkedIn to just other avenues to help get the name out there. That's
Mhm.
been very successful just to get people asking questions. And then ultimately, what we've pivoted to is really a channel first approach. And that's not that we didn't like the direct sales, right? There's success there, but there's oftentimes, especially in larger organizations, paperwork takes a while, to be honest, right? And
Sure.
so if we can work with some of our channel partners that already have paperwork, but maybe don't sell into the services side of things, maybe they're just a traditional, VAR, or they're just selling technology, we can be
Mhm.
their services arm. And so
Mhm.
that's an approach that we've taken lately that's been very successful. We can't do everything. We don't want to do everything, but the things that we're good at, we work very closely with our channel partners to say, hey, as you're having these conversations, bring us in. Starting all the way in pre-sales, right? We don't want to just be involved at the end, but how can we help and then build out the services piece of it, which then leads into a bigger relationship, future
Mhm.
sales down the road. Ultimately, a managed service is the goal, just to make sure that we can help them out on an ongoing basis. But we've had a lot of success with that channel model. That's an approach we're going to be sticking with here as we move forward.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I feel like that's what a lot of really smart companies are doing is leveraging other people's relationships to go ahead and have that mutual care for the client, because that bar is going to absolutely have that client's best interest at hand. And if they understand their client's needs, then you can just leverage your own relationship with that bar.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. The space it's big, but it's not that big, right? It's kind of a small
Yeah.
world. So you see the same names over and over again. So
Mhm.
work with somebody 5 years ago and you see their name pop up again. You just pick up right where you left off. Say, hey, what
Mhm.
have you been doing? Let's
There you
connect,
go.
right? You come up to speed.
Yeah.
What are you doing? What are you guys trying to do? And if it's a good fit, then hey, let's take that forward, right? We don't have to wait. We can just move forward with those relationships and the customer contacts that they have. And so that's the approach.
Yeah. Would you say that you also have like a sales team built out within Loom, or are you handling all of those hats yourself?
No, I can't do everything myself, that's
Yeah.
for sure. And I don't want to do everything. But we do.
Sure.
We have channel partner managers
Mhm.
that are kind of, they're not direct sales like we were just kind of talking through, but they're responsible to maintain those channel relationships, make sure that they're meeting on a regular basis, looking for common customers that we may come across, making sure that the communication channels are open, and then having the same initial conversations they would have if it was more of a direct sales model, just see if it's a good fit. And then, like very traditionally, we bring in more of our technical team to help qualify some of those deals with our channel partners together. which makes it a
Mhm.
lot easier, right? Because we know them, we trust them. So when we're doing deal qualification and things like that, it's multiple heads kind of in the room to help see if it's going to be a good fit. So it's not a massive team. We're very lean from that perspective, but we do have several, channel partner managers that are managing those relationships and across the U.S.
Yeah. What are you most excited for the rest of 25 and even going into 2026 as far as your company and the growth?
Yeah, that's a fun question, right? We talk a lot about like, hey, what are we going to do next? Very much in a growth mindset, as you would imagine, right? We know what our messaging is, we know it's landing really well, and for here, it's just acceleration. The whole business persona thing I was talking through, those 5 control points, that is landing incredibly well, and it has multiple facets to it, right? That's a managed service, but it's also, in the future, a platform that's going to go with that. And so seeing all that come together, that's the goal. That's 100% where we're headed. And so when I look at the rest of this year, it's a lot of actually making it happen. It's execution, right? We've done a lot of planning, we've done a lot of research, and we've done a lot of building. Now it's time to go make it happen, right? It's making sure that our channel partners understand what that message is, why it's unique, and then helping them grow it, right? Us partnered with them to make sure that it makes sense. So everything from road shows to co-sponsored events, things like that make sense to get the word out there, with our technology partners as well, in terms of what are the best feeds to fuel this thing that we've been talking about, right? This overarching view. It's showcase, right? We have it. We have it in our lab. We can show it. We have people that are starting to use it as a service. It's just really accelerating that growth. So it's going to be a fun rest of the year for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It starts with the plan and you're in the execution phase. And so it's definitely the fun part.
It is. Yep. Lots of pivoting too, right? I can't ignore that. So, when Chuck watches this, he'll laugh. But, our word is definitely pivot. And it's not so much that the core message changes. We're
Yeah.
very passionate in what we're doing, but the how has to be flexible, right? We have to be relevant. If we're not relevant, then we're not going to have any customers. And so, as we talk to our channel partners and talk to our customers and they say, hey, that's cool, but what about this use case? Or have you thought about it through this perspective? Sometimes the answer is no. It's like, wow, that's a really good way to think about it. Okay, let's use that. Let's pivot. And so it's very fast paced. The startup life is no joke for sure. It's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work. But if my perspective, if you really believe in what you're trying to do, and you're having those good relationships, good conversations, and it's almost self fueling, right? Like that, the excitement just builds on itself, and we just keep going. So it's a fun spot
Yeah.
to be.
It really is. And then the pivoting becomes fun, I imagine, because with each pivot and each time you have to adapt, it's for the greater good of your company.
Yeah, it is, and we do have to sit down and think sometimes because it's not just one person, and so hey, that sounds like a good idea. You get someone else that says, yeah, but not under this context, and you kind of sit back and go, oh, well, that's a good point. Maybe not. So you really have to trust the people you're with. That I can't speak highly enough of the team that we have here. We do very much trust each other, and everybody has a voice. So from
Mhm.
that perspective, if there is somebody, even if the rest of the team says, "Hey, I think we should pivot and do this," I know that if I really have a hesitation about it, I
Mm.
can say it, right? I can
Yeah.
say it honestly, and we'll talk it through and see if it makes sense. So the trust is a huge part of it. We've been talking about trust a lot on the customer side, but even internally, we have to all be on the same page. For our team, especially as small as we are, and it's there, which is part of what makes it all work.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I definitely love the teamwork and just bringing multiple minds together because so often, somebody else will think of something that you completely missed, or you're thinking of something that someone else missed. So just bringing those brilliant minds together to come up with a good solution for a path forward.
Yep, exactly. Different backgrounds, right? We talked about like I've always been in the identity space. I love the identity space. There's more to the world than the identity space, right? There's a whole lot I don't know,
Yeah.
and so there's perspectives that my teammates bring that are it's fantastic. Like we're picky and kind of building out that team on purpose, but the background proves that it's the right way to go.
Yeah, 1000%. And as far as like just the technology space that we're in here in the middle of 2025, how are you going about implementing, or have you thought about implementing AI into your current practice?
Absolutely. We can't not, right? As much as we hate playing buzzword bingo, we have to play, right? And AI is a huge piece of everything that's going on. From our perspective, we have a lot of conversations around how to protect organizations from AI, right? Because it's very much garbage in, garbage out. So we talk about how you're training your model, who has access to your model, very standard questions that some organizations have thought through, some have not. So, from our perspective, it's a conversation that needs to happen. If we look at risk in general, AI is a piece of that, right? How are you going to protect yourselves? How are you going to leverage it? Because a lot of good can come out of it too. It just has to
Totally.
be, built and guarded in a way that's actually going to be effective, and not just, for example, a healthcare organization. Well, we accidentally exposed all patient data because we actually, pointed it at the wrong data repository. That kind of stuff matters. So a lot of conversations in there on the managed service side, the product side, stuff we're building. Absolutely, we're going to take advantage of what's available to just help speed things up, right? A lot of good data insights can come out of the data that we're collecting. How do we correlate it all together to present this view, that user journey we talked about before? I
Mhm.
can build you all of that manually, not at
Mhm.
scale, right? AI may be able to help us build that at scale. So absolutely, as part of the investigation, it will be part of the solution in some way or another. But we also know it's continuing to change incredibly fast. And so
Mhm.
we don't want to build something that's centered on this one piece of any technology, including AI, only
Yeah.
to have, 6, 8 months from now to go, well, shoot, like now we're stuck. So trying to
Yeah.
hold things with kind of that open palm mentality of like, hey, if it helps us and it works, great, but let's not, bet the farm on something that may change in 6 months.
Mhm.
Ongoing conversations, back to the pivot side of it too. All the time it's like, hey, do you think it can do this? Well, I don't know. Let's try it. Right. That's the cool part of where we are too, is we can try a lot of stuff
Yeah.
without making some massive investment that we can't get back. This is where our partners come into play too. In terms of understanding, what use cases may exist, what should we be careful of. We did hire back, it's all kind of integrated, but the team perspective, one of the guys on our team is very deep in the AI space, has a lot of good, both personal experience and professional experience in building, designing, using. And so he's feeding a lot of that and pushing the envelope, right? We always need to push the envelope, but in a way that makes sense. So all of that together kind of answers the AI question. I don't think it's going to go away, but it is changing very quickly too.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you're really on top of that, which is great. And then also just from an education standpoint to your customers and your clients, because there can be risk on both ends with that as you
Absolutely.
into it.
Yep, absolutely. It'll keep changing. That's the one constant, right? The one constant is change.
It really is. It really is. Well, I really enjoyed talking with you today. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about Loom or one other thing that you can leave our audience with, to help them scale their businesses to be successful kind of in that startup phase?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of different ways to answer that question, but I guess what I would say is, as you're, especially for a startup organization, as you're kind of going down this path, one is you have to stay relevant. And I won't take credit for that. Chuck says that all the time to our team, but he's exactly right.
Hmm.
Having an idea that you think is a good one, and
Hmm.
absolutely could still be a good idea, but you need to twist it and sell it in a way that's going to be relevant to the people you're trying to sell it to. I think sometimes, especially from the startup perspective, we get stuck in the fact of like, this idea is good. I know it's good.
Mm.
I'm not going to let anybody tell me otherwise. That's okay to a point, but that doesn't mean it can't be used in a different use case. Right. So we have
Hmm.
to be able to pivot and be able to make sure that we stay relevant. The other thing that, and again, I'll give credit to Chuck here too, but is like, have fun with it. Right. You can't go back. Chuck's done this several times from a startup perspective, and he's real big on the culture side of it. So the
Hmm.
culture is phenomenal here at Loom, just totally biased, but it's a lot of fun. And he always kind of reminds us like, this is the fun part of it. Like, as we grow and as we get bigger, we're never going to be this small again, right? We're never going to have these kind of tight conversations again. It's just going to be different. So don't miss it. It's hard to do because there's just so much to do and only so many hours in a day. But stay with it, have fun, especially where we are. Like, the world's going to keep turning, technology is going to keep changing. Don't miss the fun side of what you're trying to do along the way.
Yeah, I love that. That's so great. Well, for our audience, where can they find you if they want to get in touch with you or learn more about Loom from here forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So loomsecurity.io is our website. A lot of good information there, and being updated very frequently. But based on this conversation, you can imagine why. But we're also on LinkedIn too. We do a lot of marketing from that perspective. So Loom Security is out there. Check us out. I'm certainly happy to get in touch with me as well. I'm out there from a LinkedIn perspective is probably the easiest way, and we'd love to talk. Even customer, partner, doesn't matter. Just, hey, just want to say hi in the space. I love talking about this stuff. Clearly, I probably talked way longer than you wanted me to, but it's fun. So yeah, please reach out. Happy to continue the conversation and whatever makes the most sense.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on the show today, Chris. Very valuable information. Sounds like Loom is off to a really roaring start. And so I wish you the best success with you and the company and Chuck and your founder and moving forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you for having me. It's been a fun conversation, and looking forward to hearing who else you get to join the show here in the future.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right, bye.